And yes, it is really important because if you lose track of that muffin here, that cup of coffee there, if you lose track of $5 a day, even just $5 a day, over the course of the year, you will lose track of $1,825. That's almost $2,000. And I don't know about you, but I can't afford to lose track of $2,000. So yes, it is very, very important to track. And yes, I will admit it is challenging to track everything, but it is very important. Hello, welcome, and thank you for everyone who's joining us here today. My name is Tim. I am with Money Mentors, and we're doing a little session today we call the Humans of Money Mentors, and we're talking, and what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about Financial Literacy Month. November is Financial Literacy Month, and we're going to do a series of videos, one each week for you to give you a little bit of information and support of Financial Literacy Month. And the theme is, well, talk money. So we're the humans of Money Mentors, a few of them anyways, and we're here to talk money. My name is Tim, and I am the Director of Education for Money Mentors, and I've got with me Manraj and Crystal, and maybe Manraj, you can do a quick little intro and tell us who you are.
Yep, so my name is Manraj, and I am the Curriculum and Resource Coordinator at Money Mentors, and when it comes to my experience, I have about 10 years of experience in the industry. Good, and Crystal, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, my name is Crystal, and I'm a financial counselor here at Money Mentors. I'm newer to this world, but I do have a decent amount of personal experience. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that, guys. And speaking of sharing, I've got a couple of questions I'm going to ask you and see if I can get you to share a little bit more information about yourselves too. And I guess the first question I'm going to ask here is, do you have a budget? We're going to talk about budgeting and expense tracking today. So do you guys have a budget?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So, and that's good. 50% of the country has a budget, which unfortunately means 50% of the country doesn't have a budget. 50% of the country is also struggling financially. So I don't think that's a coincidence. I think those people who have a budget are doing better. But I'm going to delve a little bit deeper here. A part of having a budget is tracking your expenses. So my next question for the two of you is, do you track your expenses?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So you still have a budget, you're on track. The next question is a little bit tougher. When I say, do you track your expenses, do you track everything? And I mean everything, right down to the last little chocolate bar you picked up at 7-Eleven as a sudden impulse buy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Then the two of you really have a budget. Unfortunately, a lot of people think they have a budget, but they don't track their expenses. And if you don't track your expenses, you don't truly have a budget. Because really, what does a budget say? A budget says, this is how I wish I was spending my money. And that's what a budget says. Tracking your expenses, though, that's the reality check. Reality says, this is how I am really spending my money. And you need that wish list of your budgeting to talk to the reality of tracking the expenses and to get them to work together. Because if you take away tracking, then all you're left with is the wish list. And don't get me wrong, that is a great start. You've got the strong beginnings of a budget, but you really need that second part of tracking. And when I say that to people, they say, oh, come on, really, do I have to track everything? And yes, it is really important, because if you lose track of that muffin here, that cup of coffee there, if you lose track of $5 a day, even just $5 a day, over the course of the year, you will lose track of $1,825. That's almost $2,000. And I don't know about you, but I can't afford to lose track of $2,000. So yes, it is very, very important to track. And yes, I will admit it is challenging to track everything, but it is very important that we try to do that.
Definitely. It's the one habit that we really want to try to build up. And sometimes I find with expense tracking, if we're first starting out, maybe start with a few categories and slowly expand out so that it's not too overwhelming at first. But this actually brings me into a question that I have for everyone. So what challenges have you faced when you're creating a budget or when you are budgeting, and how have you overcome them?
Crystal, you want to track that one first?
Yeah, so for me, challenges would obviously be initially I was trying to, like you said, you want to track every dollar, but I do think sometimes we can get lost when we're nickeling and diming every little penny. So what I started doing to stay on track and what I found really helpful is macro chunking everything and then following the quote unquote rules of finance.
No, that's very, very true. I know for myself, one of my biggest challenges, and I've admitted this openly before, I am a high impulse buyer. And especially in groceries, but in other things too, in electronics. If I'm going into an electronics store and maybe all I need to do is just get myself a little mouse, and I walk in and I go, oh my Lord, look at that hard drive they got on sale. Look at that SSD drive. Oh my, that's a beautiful graphics card. Oh, I gotta have that game. And I can be a very high impulse shopper. So if I'm going into a store where I recognize that's a weakness for me in that store, I'll call them and I'll make sure they've got the item I'm looking for, the mouse. And then from that, I'll find out how much it is with taxes. And then I'll either bring, yes, cash, or I'll bring a debit card with just the right amount of cash on it, plus maybe a couple of bucks in case they made a mistake. I'll leave the credit cards at home. And that way I can stay within my budget and reduce my impulse shopping.
That's a great way to find balance. I find for me, my biggest guilty pleasure has been impulse shopping on a bit of takeout. And I found just tracking that expense has really helped because it keeps me, in line with what like my actual goals are. And it reminds me, hey, do I want to really spend 20 bucks on takeout, or would I rather put this towards like a long-term goal that I have?
Yeah, no, very, very true. So like we all have our own little tips and tricks that work for us. So I guess the next question, and I'll answer it first, is what are the tips and tricks that you've learned that work for you? And for me, it's to recognize, are you an impulse shopper? Because lots of us are, but lots of us really don't recognize it. And then if you are an impulse shopper, recognize what's your trigger. And for me, the example I gave before, the trigger was a store. It can be a store, it can be an event, it can be a time of year, it can be anything, but for me, it was a store. So once you can identify what your trigger is, find a way to resolve the trigger. And for me, the way to resolve the trigger was to bring a limited amount of funds with me, so I couldn't overindulge. So that was the tip that worked good for me. What tip works well for you?
Well, my top budgeting tip is to just start. Create that budget. Sometimes we get so caught up in, getting prepared or being like at that perfect time that we have to create that budget. But my top budgeting tip is to just start, create the budget, and just start tracking your expenses. Take that first step.
Awesome.
Yeah, so for me, my top budgeting tip is financial fasting. I like to kind of, again, it circles back to generating new habits. And I do believe that discipline equals freedom. So when you take some time to step back and you go through maybe a 1 month reset where you're very restrictive on your spending, it does, let you sit there in the emotions and the feelings of wanting to spend, but not doing it, and just, exploring it a little bit further.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you everybody for the conversation today. So to wrap up here, we'd like to thank everyone that has taken the time to watch our little Humans of Money Mentors videos and that's participating in Financial Literacy Month. Also, feel free to check out our Money Mentors website to access more resources and information. Now, there's also the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada website, and they have a lot of great resources there as well. Now, I hope everyone else has an amazing day.
Bye, everyone.